Hi, my name is Byron Summerdahl. I'm with Ackland Avenue, and I'm joined here by Sharon and Dante. And today we're going to talk about smart story splitting. So we'll just go ahead and get right into the presentation. We're trying to get everyone on the same page in our company, and of course this is available to the community too. So hopefully it's a useful thing for people outside of Ackland Avenue. But we're trying to get everybody inside of our company on the same page as far as how we do our day-to-day work. One of those things is how we split our user stories. Inevitably, we will be in a grooming meeting or in a sprint planning meeting, and the product owner comes to us with a user story that seems a good size to the product owner, but they may not realize some of the things that go into it. So here's an example user story, just a shopping cart, a checkout. And as developers, we know that there's a lot that really goes into that. And if you start to dissect the shopping cart checkout experience, for instance, on Amazon.com, then you know that there's a preview section, a select shipping. You're going to select a method. You're going to actually pay, and then there's going to be some sort of thank you with some sort of confirmation. And of course, to a non-developer, it's just a checkout. How hard could that be? But to people that are developing software on a day-to-day basis, it can seem quite a bit larger than what it seems like to everybody else. So the task that we have in our grooming meetings is to split this card or this story. So we can't just have shopping cart checkout. It's got to be some other types of things. Now, many times we've done this in the past, and we're not doing this anymore. But in the past, we have split things based on the different layers of things. So we use Trello, and so we create a card. Instead of one card for the whole shopping cart checkout experience, we create one card for the checkout user interface, and then another card for the checkout API, another card for the checkout domain, another checkout for the database, another card for the checkout card processor, things like that. So we're thinking in a vertical sense. We're trying to separate the layers into separate cards and call those user stories. There are some problems with this. Let me mention this to you. What typically will happen is, imagine that the user interface takes a whole sprint to finish. And then the API finishes a sprint later. Domain logic, another sprint later. The database, another sprint later. And then the card processor, another sprint later. So at the end of each sprint, basically the client has nothing to see except for at the very beginning. So the user interface, yes, it looks nice, but nothing actually works. So then they get to the second sprint, and they still have a user interface that doesn't really do anything, because even hooking it up to an API doesn't actually provide any kind of functionality. Then you get to the domain logic, and you're not really saving anything to the database yet, and so on and so forth. So at the end of every sprint, the client is not really happy. And what we really want is for the client to be happy. So this method is just not a good option. It's not a good way to split the cards. This is called vertical splitting, where you take the layers, the technical layers of a piece of functionality, and you split it by its layers. Vertical. We want to do something slightly different. So what we're going to do, what we are doing currently in Ackland Avenue, and probably a good idea for anybody to do this, is to think in a more horizontal sense. For instance, in the first, I've got a baby in my office, by the way. For instance, if you've got a preview order page or feature as part of the checkout, then that is what you could deliver during the first sprint. And you would basically rotate through the different technical layers: user interface, API, domain logic, database, card processor, and you'd be working through those in a bit of a cycle. But you would be applying all of those different layers to the same preview order feature, and so that at the end of that sprint, you've got a happy client. Not that they're happy because you've got the whole checkout process finished, but they're happy because you've provided them with something that is actually deployable. It's a full section of the feature. And then the process goes on and on and on. With every sprint, you're able to deliver another actually working piece of functionality. Sprint 1, Sprint 2, Sprint 3, Sprint 4. You still end up with the same amount of sprints, but instead of an unsatisfied client at the end of every sprint, you have a satisfied client. By the end of the Sprint 5, you've got a client that has been happy the whole time instead of just at the very end. This is called horizontal splitting. So slicing or splitting the story horizontally instead of vertically by its technical layers, horizontally by its logical features. And this type of splitting just makes a much happier client. Now, what happens if one of these sub features that one of these slices that we've created is too big? Well, what we can do is start to split it also into its smaller pieces. For instance, for the preview order screen, we're going to have a list of items. We're going to be able to change the quantity of those items. We can remove an item from the list, or we can move an item from this list to the wish list. This is basically what happens in Amazon. And so we're basically taking one of our horizontal splits, and now we're doing it vertically. Well, this is okay because as long as the first split happens horizontally, then we are free to be able to start vertically splitting that feature into smaller features, into smaller user stories. So the user story for the item list would be something like, as a user, I can see a list of my items that I've put into my cart. As a user, I can change the quantity of an item that I put into my cart, and so on and so forth. This is a great way to split a cart. As long as we're horizontal first, then we're able to start splitting into smaller pieces. Here's an example of how a sprint might go, and it looks like I've left off my number 1. Oh, there it goes. So the first sprint might be all item list. Second sprint might be change quantity, and then so on and so forth. Each sprint is actually delivering real functionality that can be deployed. So even if you deploy the item list by itself, it's not the whole preview order feature, but you can actually show a list. So that's something that could be that actually brings some business value. Even if it's not usable by the client at this very moment, it is actually bringing some sort of business value at the end of the sprint. If you had done the item list without the domain logic or without the database, then it actually wouldn't bring real business value because it's not actually usable. So that is my quick explanation of smart story splitting in 8 minutes and 50 seconds. Do you all have any questions?
Uh,
Or
what
comments?
happens? Yes, what happens when you are splitting something and you realize that to bring business value, you need to cross several of these layers. Or these cars. Suppose that the preview order doesn't bring any business value without the select shipping, for example.
Right. So the business value is not necessarily in that it is immediately usable, but in that it contributes to the usability. So yes, you can't actually. I mean, maybe previewing an order, it could be used by itself, but you can't really finish the payment until you've done the shipping method or the payment method. So yes, things are connected, and yes, things are prerequisites one to another. But that doesn't stop the business value from actually being there. I mean, I don't know how many clients would actually want to do this, but they could have a site where they have a shopping cart. We're assuming the shopping cart's already built, where we have a shopping cart, and they want to just look at the items in the shopping cart. That's the item list. And then changing the quantity, yeah, I mean, that could bring value without actually selecting the shipping method, just because they want to be able to edit something that's in the shopping cart. Same thing with removing item and moving to the wish list. So it's kind of it's foggy. It's not always exactly clear cut on how business value is brought. But we still have to make sure that user stories are small enough to whether they are understandable and testable.
Okay. I have another question.
Okay.
Normally, I have been treating the user interface, the API, the domain logic, database, and a card processor. By the way, like dev task.
Yep.
But I don't know if we can normalize the dev task in our process also, because normally we do the same.
Yeah.
We are doing the same always. We need to write a controller. We need to write the unit test for that controller. We need to write at least one service to communicate the user interface to the backend. We need to write the unit test for that service. We need to write the module. And also the command handler, the unit test of the command handler, the unit test of the module, for example. So I don't know if we can normalize that dev task as common in our projects.
I think that's totally possible, and of course this is getting into the grooming side of things. But we use Trello. Trello has a feature to where you can copy a checklist. Really useful. So if you've already created you're grooming several cards, right, and you've already created one checklist with a list of very common tasks, well then just copy the checklist to the card that you're grooming. Um, I'll bet that that every card is not going to be exactly the same. There are probably some common things, but maybe there's a user story that actually doesn't have a user interface. Maybe
Yes,
maybe it's something that does something like it sends an email only in the back end or something like that. So yeah, there's commonality. We can definitely leverage that commonality and copy the checklists. Um,
yes,
but I like the way you're thinking, though. Like those dev tasks basically communicate the technical layers for
yes,
that one user story. That's what
right.
we're looking for. That's
Yes,
exactly what we're looking for.
that is what I am thinking, because when I see that column domain layer card process database, for me it's dev task.
Yeah. Yeah. Sharon, you got anything from the QA perspective?
Yes, I have a question. For example, when we add uh, bug cards to the backlog, those cards needs to be transformed to this groom
Hmm.
method, or just leave it like the bug format.
Yeah, you're talking about bugs,
Yeah.
and bugs are not always user stories. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they are reacting to a user story. So I would say continue to create. And I'll say this the same thing to our product owners, right? If you've got an idea or if there's something that you need to communicate, just create the card, communicate it to the team. And then later on, when it's time to actually work on that, that's when we'll split it. So
Yeah.
the splitting is going to happen in the grooming. So if you create a bug a few days ago and it just happens to be too big to work on, then the people who are grooming will actually go ahead and split it at that point.
That's,
And they might go through this, or maybe it's just a matter of fixing three things and they wanted to split out one of those things.
yeah, that was my other question, because sometimes where we are in a sprint and maybe we have an idea for a new feature. Usually on QA, what we do is like we add a card with QA suggestions, but
Yep.
I'm not sure if that's the correct way, or just like try to do a card with scenarios, user stories. What should be the best way for doing that?
Yeah,
Or
and once again, that's just kind of like what I would say to a product owner too is if you're trying to decompose an application or you're trying to understand what the client wants, client says they want a shopping cart with a checkout. Well, write a card that says shopping cart checkout. It's not creating cards or user stories that are too big is not a problem. It's not going to offend anyone. It should not offend anyone. It's just that when the card goes into the grooming phase, then that's when we start to try to split it up. If we put the burden on you, Sharon, or on one of our product owners or a business analyst, if we put the burden of this card must come to us already split, it's just not going to happen, or it's going to mess with their creative juices and the creative process when they're coming up with these epics or these user stories. So it's so much better just to allow people to have their whatever flow they've got when they're thinking about these things, and the card or the user story makes it to the development team. They start to groom it. They're like, okay, this is too big. Nobody's offended. They'll just start splitting it up. No big deal. So I would say, if you've got a suggestion card, a suggestion user story, or a bug or whatever, just do it. Do it in whatever form you need to do it in to be able to communicate the idea. And then once it gets to the grooming team, then don't be surprised if they split it up.
Okay, thank you.
What else? Anything else?
Not from my side.
Okay, quick quiz for you two. Which is better, horizontal or vertical splitting?
Horizontal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Pass the test. All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
Same. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.